Some women take the rights that we have right now for granted, as if women that came before us didn't have to fight for these rights. So let's talk about how the right to birth control was won. There was a court case called Griswold versus Connecticut that led to legal contraception. So this case, Griswold versus Connecticut, was decided on June 7th, 1965. This case was significant because the Supreme Court ruled that unmarried people had the right to use contraception. It essentially paved the road for reproductive privacy and freedoms that are in place today, even though they are being eroded because people don't want women to have reproductive rights. Prior to that, birth control was either restricted or outlawed, and that is because of a man named Anthony Comstock. I did a video on him. I'm going to insert a piece of Anthony Comstock's history.
This is Anthony Comstock. He was born in 1844. He died in 1915. But his reign of terror lasted for 100 years. His Comstock laws, his chastity laws, lasted for 100 years just about. And women didn't get the right to birth control and to control their own bodies and reproduction systems until the 1960s. Up until that point, their bodies were controlled by men. Their bodies were controlled by their husbands, their fathers, or the doctors that could make decisions for them. The Federal Comstock Law of 1873 made it illegal to sell or distribute materials that promoted contraception or abortion, to send literature or materials pertaining to these subjects through the United Postal Service, or to obtain them from overseas. Legislators passed the law hoping to mitigate the influence of obscene materials on the morality of the general population, as well as to stem the growing practice of couples engaging in premarital sex.
Okay, so I just gave you a rundown about the Comstock Law. So background on this case. In 1960, there were many states that had laws, usually passed sometime during the late 1800s that I just told you about, that restricted advertising and the sale of contraceptives. Some states like Connecticut and Massachusetts prohibited the use of birth control altogether. In fact, in the state of Connecticut, the use of contraception was punishable by a $50 fine or up to 1 year in prison. The law banned the use of any drug, medicinal article, or instrument for the purpose of preventing conception. This will have to be a part 2 so that I can give you the complete rundown on this. So stay tuned. In 1961, Estelle Griswold and Dr. C. Lee wanted to open up a birth control clinic in New Haven, Connecticut. Their clinic provided information, instruction, and medical advice to married people about ways to prevent conception. At the clinic, they would also examine the wives and prescribe the best contraceptive device or material for each of them to use. The clinic only operated from November 1st to November 10th in 1961. After being open just 10 days, both Griswold and Buxton were arrested. They were then prosecuted and found guilty, and each fined $100. Their conviction was upheld by the Appellate Division of the Circuit Court as well as the Connecticut Supreme Court. Griswold appealed her conviction to the Supreme Court. The plaintiff's claim. In Griswold versus Connecticut, Estelle Griswold and Dr. C. Lee Buxton disputed that Connecticut law against birth control conflicted with the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment, which states, no state shall make or enforce any laws which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person equal protection of the laws. The Supreme Court hearing, they argued their case in front of the Supreme Court. 7 justices presided. The Supreme Court decision in 1965, it was a 7-2 decision. The court ruled that the Connecticut law was unconstitutional. The court further stated that the constitutional right to privacy guaranteed married couples the right to make their own decision. Married couples being the key that you need to keep in mind. 1965. The court maintained that the right to marital privacy was intrinsic in the First, Third, Fourth, Fifth, and Ninth Amendments. The ruling further established the right to privacy in the marital relationship to be an unenumerated one. I'm going to skip down in this article. I'm skipping down because I want you guys to see that it was not until 1972 that unmarried women got the right to use birth control, because Griswold was about married couples, because married couples were the ones that she was targeting with her clinic. So it wasn't until 1972 that an unmarried woman had the right to actually get some birth control. 1972 was not that long ago. So I am begging people to keep in mind the rights that you have right now as women are still very tenuous, and you see the way they are chipping away at our reproductive rights, and these were rights that were banned for 100 years. So keep that in mind. Like, comment, share.